You're going to look.
Present, so you can proceed if you.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Governance and Council Operation Committee. Before we start, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll of attendance for today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the chair is present. Councillor Vicente?
Hello.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Medeiros has not yet joined the meeting, but may be joining. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, he just texted me. He's going to be on. Okay, so thank you, everyone. The next item is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item on today's meeting? If so, please use the chat function on the speaker's list. Seeing none, yes. Is there any more addition to this agenda? There's none. We have a motion moved by Councillor Williams to approve of the agenda. All in favor? Is in favor? Instead of seeking a recording vote of this item, I will ask if there's any opposed to this any motions. Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Thank you. There's no objection, so the motion carries. Delegation. Does any members have? Okay. Number 3. Do any members have that declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Comprehensive Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Mr. Clerk, I don't see anything, so he will note of the meeting's minutes. For delegation, that we don't have any consent, we don't have any staff presentation, so we'll go to right away to 9.1. Staff report on the next item is a staff report regarding the standing committee structure updates. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat function. So, Mr. Clerk, I think Councilor Medeiros is on, and he has a question. Councilor Medeiros.
Sorry, my apologies, through you, Chair. We are now on the standing committee structure, is that correct?
Yes.
And, okay, so from my understanding, I think and I don't see Councilor Vicente on the board, and I thought he had questions. Is he on the committee? Is he on?
I was trying to put my hand up, but go ahead, Councilor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess through you, Chair, to Peter. And I appreciate the changes brought forward, and I understand the rationale since we moved, in this case, one of the departments, SecDev, under planning. I guess my only concern, and I share probably the concern with my colleagues, that we would want to continue to have ECDev still be a sort of standing committee item. And even though it reports under planning, but we would still want it to be a standalone as an agenda item at committee. And in terms of structure, understanding that it does go under planning now, and right now, I guess from some of the changes that we have, that would sort of put myself as a chair and Councillor Fortini as vice chair. But I do understand that Councillor Fortini and Councillor Vicente, there seemed to be some sort of mutual understanding, and I'll hand it over to Councillor Vicente if you would like to say something. But I do, as a temporary, I guess, well, not temporary, but I do understand that one of the proposed changes was that economic development would bring reports under planning. I just think that planning, because we have sometimes long meetings, and it's very sort of specific, and sort of the people that sort of call in are very specific to their planning applications. I would encourage that we continue the changes. I'll wait and listen to Councillor Vicente, but essentially what, I would like to move, and I think that would be, City Clerk, if you can walk me through amending it as, and I'm not sure about the other departments, but where I would like to amend it is that ECDev still have a standalone agenda, still become a standalone agenda, be it under planning and economic development as a standing committee meeting during our other committee meetings. I think that it should be continue sort of to be a regular agenda item. So I'm not sure the type of amendment that we would require to sort of make that happen. And subsequently, I guess Councillor Vicente would continue as the vice chair. And then after, I would be the chair until, something else happens or one of my colleagues steps up and, shows any interest and so on. So that's the spirit of this, Peter. So in terms of what we need to sort of achieve that, if you can sort of let me know, and I'll wait till what my colleagues have to say. I'm not sure about the other items, but that's the item I just had some concern about. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I could respond now, or I could wait till after Councillor Vicente.
You can speak now, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to members of committee. So this report brings forward some potential changes to the standing committee structure. And really what we're talking about then is option 2, which is in the report. And option 2 is basically taking the economic development section out of the Committee of Council structure and moving it over to the other standing committee, which is Planning and Development Committee, renaming that committee Planning and Economic Development. And it would be adding a new section specific to economic development matters within the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda, standing committee. So it wouldn't just be interspersed with planning matters, it would be treated as a separate section, just as it is now at on the Committee of Council. The staff report does speak to and concludes at this point, unless the committee decides otherwise, that the current vice chair, the necessity for a chair and vice chair for Economic Development Committee matters may not be necessary anymore if it is assumed within Planning and Development Committee, but that will be up to this committee to decide if they want to keep that or not. So just to Councillor Medeiros' question, I just want to confirm that if you're proposing option 2, then economic development section would be picked up from Committee of Council and just moved over in its entirety to the Planning and Economic Development Committee, and would still be its own section within that committee. At the end of the day, there still will only be 2 standing committees, Committee of Council and Planning and Development Committee. I just want to confirm that that's still the intent that you're speaking about, and you're not talking about introducing and creating a brand new standing committee specific only to economic development.
Yeah, yes, through you, Chair, and thank you, Peter, for the clarification. Yeah, essentially what I'm trying to achieve is that we continue our planning meetings, which we have one tonight, and would only be, I guess, sort of a planning and development section separate from the economic development section, and economic development would continue as a standing item, regardless if it's under planning or, but we just wanted to continue on the Committee of Council. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, sorry. So through you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to, then what I'm hearing is to keep economic development section within the Committee of Council section, as we do today.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. And I think the importance for that is, and part of the rationale, and my apologies for sort of muffling all this, is the idea is I understand from a reporting relationship and from a chair and vice chair relationship that, that comes under planning now. But I think it's important for council that we continue to have economic development as a standing committee item, because I think that separation is important for us to continue on those economic development files, even though we understand the reporting relationship is changed. So that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve, but I'm doing a bad job communicating that. So I'll wait till my colleagues and maybe Councillor Vicente can bring more wisdom to the discussion. But I think you understand what we want to achieve, Peter.
Yes.
So
Okay.
just to be clear, we're going to keep everything the same, just it follows under planning. I kind of agree because sometimes the planning goes a long time and we're there until 10, 11 o'clock. And if we put everything together, we might be there a lot longer. Now, I don't want to hold anything to do with permits and planning. So I agree. So we'll keep everything the way it is now, just that they follows under planning. Is that what you're saying, Councilor Medeiros?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So Councilor Vicente, I don't see you on the chat box. You're using your hand?
If I may speak, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, use the chat box. Go ahead and use the chat box so I can see it. Thank you.
I was in chat box, but I don't think it's working for me.
Okay.
So I think, Mr. Chair, through you to the clerks and to staff, I think the option that we are looking to avail ourselves of is option 1, which is for the committee structure to remain as is.
Wow.
Councilor Medeiros?
Sorry, Chair. I do see. I just got on the board. I do see Councillor Williams is on the board before me.
Okay.
Yeah. So under option 1, we are saying that economic development would remain as part of Committee of Council, recognizing the importance that economic development has for our city, right? But this does, as folks are aware, staff has reorganized the department so that economic development and planning are together, working together. But in terms of how committees are run, economic development is an item within Committee of Council, not as part of the Planning Committee, which happens on its own. And so I believe that is the intent of what Councillor Medeiros has explained. And I know that under option 3, Mr. Clerk, you have put out there the opportunity for the rotation of
chairs to lead.
Of the order of the agenda, correct? Mm-hmm. Through the Committee of Council. And I believe that that also would be appropriate for us to do at this time.
Mr. Clerk, I always thought that where every 3 months we were supposed to rotate. I remember hearing you saying at the beginning.
So through you, Mr. Chair, that was a consideration from the last term of council and was put to this term of council. And at the beginning of this term, this council decided at that point to just keep it as is. So that's why economic development currently is the first section of the 4 listed on the Committee of Council agenda, and the chair or vice chair leading that section generally opens the meeting. But if it's the will of this committee and approved by council that we rotate the sections, whether there's 3 or as the discussion's leading to now is 4 sections with economic development back in Committee of Council, that can be rotated. And certainly the chairs in terms of leading, opening the meeting and ending the meeting can be rotated as well, if that's the will of committee.
Okay, yeah, I did remember. I guess I'm getting old. I can remember everything. That's up to the committee. I'm fine with that.
Okay, so
you're all
through
done?
you, Chair. No, so through you, Chair, then I would just amend Councillor Medeiros's request and add that the agenda be rotated. And Mr. Clerk, perhaps you can advise on the frequency of that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would advise probably it would make sense to do it every 3 months. So it's almost like quarterly, just to allow some consistency.
So for clarity, you can codify that in the wording of the motion.
Yeah, we used to have it every 3 months. It's a lot easier than doing rotating every committee. So I'm okay with it. Councilor Maderos, you're okay with that?
Thank you, Chair, and I'll wait for Councilor Williams to speak, and
Okay.
I'll talk after. Thank you.
Okay. So Councilor Vicente, you're all done? That's
Yes, Mr. Chair.
okay. Councilor Williams, sorry. I just wanted to make sure everything was clear.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair. So to understand what's going on here, I did read section, option 1 was to keep it as a standing item on the Committee of Council agenda. And so the question I have is around the rotating chair. If you can provide some more clarity to what that means. So the rotating chair is who, is what, and what would that look like? That's to the clerk. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to members of committee. So the intent of this would be, so you may recall, so let's think about Wednesday's Committee of Council meeting. So there are 4 sections to the agenda. It's economic development, corporate services, public works, and community services. That's been hard-coded at the start of this term. For simplicity, committee has assumed that whoever's chairing the economic development section, in this case it's Councillor Vicente in his role as vice chair, will open the meeting. And he will do the approval of the agenda, declarations, delegations. He'll manage the front end of the meeting. Then once we get to the committee sections, the respective chairs will lead that portion of the meeting. The current situation is the last section is community services at this point, which is Councillor Santos's chair. So she ends the meeting by continuing on with public question period, referred matters, and closed session and adjournment as necessary. With the rotation, what this would mean is every 3 months from the start of this, we would rotate the sections, the 4 sections, and that would give an opportunity to whoever is the first section, they would assume the chair to open the meeting, and whoever is the last section, whoever's the chair, they would end the meeting with all the other general sections for that committee meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think the rotation, I think the question is, how long are we planning on doing the rotation for? Is this going to be a plan until when? Till the end of term?
Through you, Mr. Chair, would be to the end of term if this carries, and we'll hard code it into the procedure bylaw. So every 3 months, we would pick the first meeting of that 3-month period and rotate the sections in the agenda that's prepared, and then work with the respective chairs to ensure that it's clear who's opening the meeting, who's ending the meeting.
Okay, so it sounds like there's an extra step that will be added into this. I know it might not seem like a big deal for some, but sometimes that logistics of coordinating who's going to go, it's an extra step. So it leads me to question why we don't just open up the opportunity for to fill the role and allow for council to choose, or let the councillors put their intentions forward, just so it can be more concrete, it's done, it's straightforward. So based on, I'd like to hear what my colleagues think, but I think to me it would be good to have do the rotation maybe for a month, and then just go into choosing who that position is going to be, who is going to be chairing that position, or whatever, whether it's Councillor Vicente moves into the chair or whatever may have you. So I'm thinking to make it a little bit more straightforward, actually have council choose who would be the one chairing these meetings. So those are my thoughts. And I just look forward to hearing what other my colleagues say. Thank you.
So I see Councillor Maderos speaking again.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair, I think, again, this is one of those, just to avoid any further confusion and ambiguity, and thank you, Peter. I know, so for the alignment, understanding that economic development, which hasn't been merged, it's put under planning. And as a result of that, the natural course of action would have been that since it's under planning, so be it the Director of Economic Development reports to the Commissioner of Planning and Development, and now the name changes in itself. So as a result of our Commissioner, which is in this case Richard Ford, is now Economic Development falls under the department he runs. The natural evolution would have been that the Chair and Vice Chair would continue, which that would have been myself as the Chair of Planning and Vice Chair Councillor Fortini as of Planning as well. For some form of compromise, understanding that Councillor Vicente have done a stellar job sort of taking on the role as the face of economic development, there was interest in him continuing in that, which Councillor Fortini has accepted that. And I'm trying to just encapsulate what we're talking about, this rotation, okay? So effectively, to avoid any further ambiguity, Peter, that would subsequently make me the chair and Councillor Vicente continue as vice chair for economic development, and Councillor Paleshi continues as the head of the recovery economic development working group until anything else changes. So, and what we've asked to happen, which you've explained, is that the rotational basis, we are talking about who leads the committee meetings, such as for the last couple of months or the onset, Councillor Vicente has led it because we've started with economic development. So the rotation speaks specifically to the order of the presentations and who will continue that chairing. So we're suggesting, or what is in the report, that after 3 months, there will be a change. No longer would it be economic development starting off the meeting. It could be, for example, community services, where then in that case it would be Councillor Santos, or then 3 months later, corporate services, in that case it would be Councillor Singh. So that's specifically, we're talking about the rotation. So I just want to re-encapsulate everything, and that is my understanding. Am I correct, City Clerk Peter?
Through you, Mr. Chair, on the latter half, you are correct. So the existing chairs of the 4 sections would rotate opening or closing the meeting depending on where their section is in the agenda. The initial comment you made in terms of this is another issue that this committee, I guess, needs to take up if it wishes to.
Yes.
There is a chair position for economic development section, which is currently vacant, and there is a vice chair, which is currently held by Councillor Vicente. Councillor Vicente has been assuming the role of chair in his duties as vice chair, and that's fine. Council made the decision 2 years ago to confirm for the entire term of council those chair and vice chair positions. So they're hard-coded into the procedure bylaw. It also is in the procedure bylaw that the chair and the vice chair can exchange positions if they wish. But that's mutual agreement between those 2 individuals. We do have a vacancy today in the role of chair economic development section. So this committee can decide to do a number of options with that. They could decide to fill that. They could decide to allow Councillor Vicente, if he wishes, to assume that role, and then there would be a vacancy in the vice chair, and committee can fill that, or they can keep the status quo. I think you had said, Councillor Medeiros, that there was potentially an assumption based on your, and I should say that all of this is completely independent of all these working groups and recovery task forces that have been set up for COVID. That has nothing to do with the procedure bylaw. There has been no linkage established by council on that. So the comment made about you perhaps assuming the role of the economic development section chair, that would have to be a decision of council.
Yeah, and that's
council.
And through you, Chair, and that's the ambiguity I refer to, because the logic would be, if economic development now reports under planning, then economic development is not a standalone item anymore because it's under planning. But by virtue of Councillor Vicente and us councillors wanting to continue, then we're stating that it should be continue, even though it's a reporting relationship under planning and development, then what we would do is keep it as a standalone. So that's the ambiguity, which I wanted to close the loop on this and identify then who in fact will be the chair. Is it something that we do a separate vote for, or do we continue since it's under planning? The rationale, which I would put forth, notwithstanding, and my colleagues can speak better to me, is that if it was under planning now, then it would just be under, because that's the logical choice. But if we're keeping it as a standalone, then that's another discussion. or we just have that. So this is kind of the discussions that we need to sort of have, and that just closing the loop on that ambiguity aspect of who effectively is the chair. Because the standing committee, these committees too that we created for task forces, put another wrench in when it comes to representation. So a simple thing like Brampton Board of Trade reaching out to who is the chair of economic development? Is it planning and economic development? Do we do that separation? Then how can we have a reporting relationship to the commissioner of planning? But then after we're saying that the chairs and vice chairs don't have that relationship anymore or don't have that representation. And that's where I just want to close the loop on this ambiguity. So I'll hand it over to my other colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Councilman. Councilor Vicente, you're on the board.
My apologies, Chair. No, I am not.
Okay, Councilor Williams.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So, thank you, Councilor Medeiros. That's essentially what I was looking at, finding the answer for. I'm really thinking that it would be a good step for us to open that up and actually have a vote on it at in council with our all the colleagues at the table, so we can decide who is going to fill that position, similar to how we did at the beginning of our term. We do have almost 2 years left of this time, and economic development is a very important area that we should have the consistency and should have point people that people know who they can go to when they have questions or concerns or need some direction on, on economic development. So I would suggest that we do bring this back to a larger committee and have that be the process that we look to. And to the clerk, what would you suggest is the best way in which we do that? Is that an amendment to the motion, or is that a separate section that needs to be voted on? If you could provide your guidance, that'd be helpful.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think there's 3 issues at play here that we need to just compartmentalize. The first is, what is the standing committee structure and sections? And the key decision point is, does economic development section get lifted from committee of council and moved over to planning and economic development, if we want to call that committee that, or does it stay where it is? The current motion on the floor is Councillor Visante's motion to keep it as is. So economic development with that motion, if it carries, would stay part of committee of council. The second decision point is on the rotation of the chair and the chair of opening the committee of council. When I say rotation, I'm speaking only to meeting by meeting about who's actually opening the meeting and who's ending the meeting. And in red, which is on the screen, is a motion that's proposed that I believe Councillor Vicente put forward as well, to have a rotation for the 4 sections on a 3-month interval. The third decision point or issue to be addressed is the one that Councillor Medeiros has correctly raised, is there currently is a vacancy in the position of chair economic development section. How best does this committee wish to recommend to council how to fill that? As I've said, the procedure bylaw today says the chair and vice chair of a section can decide to rotate the role. So one becomes chair, the other becomes vice chair, and they rotate it. And that's a mutual consent of those 2 individuals. In this case, there is only one individual for economic development, Councillor Vicente. So if we were to follow the procedure bylaw today, effectively he would get first right of refusal if he wants to assume that role. If he doesn't, then that would be left up to council how they wish to fill that role. I hope that clears things up a little bit.
Yes, it does. it just highlights that there's a lot more at play here to be decided. I think right now, with regards to the first right of refusal and then bringing it to the larger group, I think that's a good way to go, in my opinion, just so that we can give all members an opportunity to choose whether or not they want to work with Councillor Vicente, or if Councillor Vicente wants to continue on in that position or not. It's so important with this area to have that connection and point person to go to, because of how important economic development is to the city. So yeah, I know Councillor Medeiros is on the board next, so I'm interested in hearing what his thoughts are and where we're going to go with this. So I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Peter, just to clarify, we were about 7-8 months ago didn't we approve this already, that economical development should be under planning?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there's no resolution of council on that.
Because I remember we were.
There was discussion, but it was never.
Discussion in the boardroom, how we did, our CEO did the chart. And construction engineering on the public works, economical development on the planning. That was something he did at the time. So I don't remember if it was approved or not. But I'm glad you cleared it up. It's at the end of the day, it's up to Councilor Vicente if he's going to be chair or not. But since it's going under planning and this Councilor Medeiros is chair of planning, I'm going to agree with Councilor Medeiros. We leave everything the way it is. But the rotation, I always thought there was a rotation, which I'm glad we're rotating and give everyone a fair chance. So we got some more. Councilor Medeiros back on the board.
Yeah, and I think, again, this is going to be a complete ring around because, again, the logic, the decision, from my understanding now, again, Peter, this is a difficult one for you, is economic development moved under planning from a reporting relationship. And effectively, what we're trying to do is we created one department, and that's how we attribute a chair and a vice chair. But what we're trying to say is that even though it went under the department, so i.e., for example, construction also moved and it went under public works, do we say that construction, since it came from community services, continues now with Councillor Santos and Councillor Williams under the construction section of, no, we don't say that. We say that construction now is under public works, so public works takes over responsibility. We look at culture. Do we say now culture is not under communication, culture is not under corporate services? Do we continue? But what we're doing here, because we're doing the exact same thing in all three instances, we're saying, no, we want ACDEP to remain the same. And we don't think that the chair and vice chair, which in that case are myself and Councillor Vicente, continue, that it should continue with Councillor Vicente and leave it open. And we're sitting here scratching our heads on how we're trying to achieve everything to continue. My sort of the quick and easy, what I would suggest, and again, this could be maybe a further discussion at Committee of Council when all my council colleagues can be there. If it's under planning economic development now, and there's a reporting relationship, then it's the chair and vice chair that effectively are. And I understand me being the chair, effectively the illusion is that I benefit with it under planning. If it's not under planning, then continue the way it is. If it's under planning, then I'm the chair. And Councillor Fortini is the vice chair. What I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Fortini, that relationship, because we understand Councillor Vicente has a keen interest to continue on the file, and he has a lot of passion for the area, you have graciously suggested that, or suggesting that, yes, economic development falls under planning, but you have no interest in being the vice chair. Thus, you're fine for Councillor Vicente to continue as the vice chair for an economical development section. And it still falls under planning. Simply, we have the committee meetings, the standing committee. We still have a standing committee meeting. So that is my sort of understanding, which would make this clean from a representation perspective. Or if we continue exactly as is, which Councillor Vicente, I guess, moved, that we leave it for option one, then for every other department, be it culture, be it thing, we haven't moved the chair and vice chair. We just put it under who the current chair and vice chair is, but we're going to do something different as economic development is a standing alone committee item, but we're not going to be changing the chair and vice chair, or because even though it goes under the department, but we're going to keep everything as is because it's important. But again, the reporting relationship from the ambiguity, if a stakeholder, in this case, a small business wants to know who is the chair of economic development, and that's what we need clarity on. And these committees that we created, the task forces, as much as they were good intentioned, has created further confusion on who does what and what's on left field. So if we're not ready for an answer today, maybe it's a question of us taking a step back and allowing for this discussion, refer this to maybe Committee of Council, or maybe my colleagues will bring more clarity and we can move on with the process. Because right now, I think a lot of us are thinking different things. And essentially, there has to be some consistency, and we have to leave here with some clarity, not only for us internally, but also for the stakeholder. Ultimately, our election, we elected Councilor Vicente for a vice chair, and we had someone else as a chair. That chair is no longer the chair of the committee. And, I would want, even for my own position, to not have this ambiguity. Am I the chair, not the chair? I participate in briefings, but I'm not really the chair. Like, I need to understand what is the department. And, we can't be blowing and sucking at the same time. So unless, we have clarity and the motion speaks to it, then we have to make this decision either today or we refer to a broader discussion with my councillor colleagues. So I'll stand there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Medeiros. So my understanding is, it was going to follow on to economical development.
Mr. Chair, I'm on the board.
It's going under planning. So Councilor Vicente has been chairing until now. So I like to leave everything the way it is.
Mr. Chair, I'm on the board, I believe.
Yeah, and just leave everything the way it is as vice chair, and it follows under planning. And Councilor Vicente can still continue, and we'll leave it standing committee the way it is now, and don't change anything. So Councilor Vicente, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm hearing Councilor Medeiros, I think, clearly at this point in terms of how do we eliminate that ambiguity? Because Councilor Fortini is the vice chair of planning, as was chosen at the beginning of the term. I'm the vice chair of economic development, again, chosen at the beginning of the term. And currently we have no one serving in the role of economic development. And simultaneous to all of that, the departments have been reorganized and merged according to council's wishes and desire to see files prioritized more effectively. So in that situation, and I guess my question would be to the clerk, is it possible, Mr. Clerk, for us to have Councillor Fortini remain as Vice Chair of Planning, myself to remain as Vice Chair of Economic Development, and for Councillor Medeiros to serve going forward as Chair of Planning and Economic Development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, if that's the will of committee, that was where option 2 was heading, with further clarity that you've just, and Councilor Medeiros have stated about making sure that economic development stays as its own distinct section within the new Planning and Economic Development Committee, with, if you wish, Councilor Medeiros as chair and yourself as vice chair. So yes, that is an option. That's not what your motion says, but that is an option.
Thank you. So, but my motion, the motion that's on the board right now says two things. It says that economic development remain an item within committee of council.
Right.
It is not to be shifted over to Mondays.
Right.
But it is to remain as part of committee of council, and for the agenda items to be rotated. And you would be the one who does that rotation and communicates with the chairs or vice chairs as need be. But I think what we're hearing now, what committee would like to see happen, is for a very clear indication of who is the chair of both departments. So I would move then here an additional amendment, Mr. Clerk, and I'll allow you to wordsmith it accordingly, that for the remainder of the term, at council's wishes, that Councilor Medeiros be the chair of the Planning and Economic Development Department, even as Councilor Fortini remains vice chair for planning, and myself as vice chair for economic development. Can we do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. I would suggest that that part 3 and the above, that being option 1 as be amended to read, so that be withdrawn. And effectively what you're moving now is option 2, with the condition that Councillor Medeiros assumes the role as chair of the economic development section of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. Councillor Fortini remains as vice chair of planning, and you remain as vice chair of economic development. Yes.
And where does the economic development section properly lie?
So under that motion, it would lie under the Planning and Economic Development Committee, which meets on Mondays. So there would be no economic development section under Committee of Council. I just want to point out that I don't think, unless members are considering having a section under both Committee of Council and Planning Committee, I don't think that's probably in the best interest. There needs to be clarity on where economic development resides.
So Peter, I just want to clarify. Sorry, Councillor Vicente.
Mr. Chair.
I just want to clarify. So on the rotation, we're all in favor of that. Am I correct? So we could leave that rotation alone. We shouldn't confuse. To rotate every 3 months, like the clerk said, we're in favor of that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's keep that. On the chair, I think, Mr. Clerk, what Paul Vicente, Councillor Vicente was saying with Madera, we leave it, everything the way it's going now, but it follows under chair of Martin Medeiros as the councillor, as a planning, and also chair of economical development. He's the vice chair there, and I'm vice chair planning. So we leave everything, but the stand-up committees should stay all the same now as we are
That's
now
correct.
in council.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, so to the clerk, so we're not going with option 2. What we are going is what the committee structure as it plays out through every committee of council remains the same. Economic development remains a priority item within committee of council. And going forward, it's understood and official that Councillor Medeiros is the chair of both planning and economic development. Okay? Because
Yes.
from a reporting standpoint, both are now under one commissioner, correct? And
We lost them.
Mr. Chair, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here. We lost Paul, Councillor Vicente. So I understand what he's saying. So we'd like to leave everything the same because I agree with him because I don't want doing this in planning at night. The planning becomes a long. So if we keep as what he's trying to say, I think is keep it as a standing committee in the daytime. He's vice chair and continues. The chair is Councillor Medeiros, and everything
Yes.
stays the way it is.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
So then, Charlotte, just for the motion, number 3 should go back to say option 1 as opposed to option 2.
We have Councillor Medeiros on also there. I think we lost Councillor Vicente. We'll go back to him if he comes back on. But Councillor Medeiros.
can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Can
Yes.
you hear me now?
We
Okay.
cleared it up. And the rotating, everything stays every 3 months. That's up to the clerk, how you want to start off. It's up to you. Yeah. Councillor Medeiros.
Yeah, and through the chair, thank you, Councillor Vicente, and I guess everyone involved, because it does bring some form of clarity, and that's exactly what, from the onset of my intervention was exactly that, is that based on the rationale from the other departments, it falls under planning and economic development. That's the new name. However, because of the special circumstance of this area and because of our desire to keep economic development a separate item, that it continues to be a standing committee item, understanding now that with I guess the reporting relationships and not to throw I guess another wrench, which is not in this report, but legislative services, that's a new department, and I know that that's coming back to committee of council, and we'll have an opportunity to identify a chair and vice chair as we expressed and as I moved before, because I did remember Councillor Bowman and Councillor Willens had expressed interest in those 2 areas. And I know, Peter, we're not talking about that, but is that something that from the 3 departments, that's something that's going to be coming back to committee of council? Is that correct? Not here.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. That's being addressed in this report. So if you go to look at that table, which is under option 2,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
let's put aside economic development. So it's going to stay with committee of council, and you're going to be assume the role of chair. In that table, you will see for community services section, for corporate support section and for public works and engineering section, we have made an attempt to align the new department structure within those three sections. So you'll see Legislative Services Department, Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, and Corporate Support Services, and some of those major functions would all fall within the Corporate Services section of Committee of Council.
Yeah.
Unless the committee wishes to try something else, but we were trying to retain the existing committee section system as much as possible.
So I would like to move as an amendment, I know to create further confusion, but I appreciate that. But I think legislative services now, because of its importance, because of issues that we're dealing with, that it should be a standalone committee item with a chair and vice chair. And I'd like to put forward as the chair, Councillor Bowman, and vice chair, Councillor Willens, to become the chair and vice chair of legislative services, which should be a standing committee item, especially considering the importance of all the work that we're doing with notwithstanding bylaw and enforcement and secondary units, etc. So there's a lot of, I think, teeth there, and similar to how we think ECDAP should be teased out and have its own sort of standing item, I think legislative services should also have that. So I'd like to put forward those two names, Councillor Bowman and Councillor Willens.
Yeah, and could I just add, I'm going to nominate, I think Councillor Bowman wants to be the chair, Councillor Willens vice chair, as we.
Yeah, I've expressed that. Thank you, Councillor Fortini.
Yeah. So, Mr. Clerk, we have to vote on all this now? We're going to do all one motion?
If it's the will of committee. So
Yeah.
if you wish, I would just like to recap. So what the effect of this motion would be in terms of the structure. Planning and Development Committee will stay as is. There's Councillor Medeiros as chair, Councillor Fortini is vice chair. Committee of Council will now have 5 sections. They will have an economic development section, and Councillor Medeiros will be identified as the chair of that section, Councillor Vicente as the vice chair. There will be a community services section with the chair, the current chair and vice chair. There will be a public works and engineering section with the current chair and vice chair. There will be a corporate services section with the current chair and vice chair. And then there will be a new legislative services section to align with the organizational departments, the administrative structure set up for the legislative services department, established with Councillor Bowman as chair and Councillor Willens as vice chair. And then the other motion will be the of those 5 sections, rotating the order of those sections every 3 months and allowing the respective chair of each of those 5 sections to either open the meeting for that 3-month period or close the meeting for that 3-month period, depending on where their section falls in the overall agenda structure.
So everyone's okay with that? Yeah, okay. And we'll leave it up to you, I guess, not this one, I guess, in this first committee, but the following. How are you going to rotate that, Mr. Clerk? It's up to you.
So, Mr. Chair, we'll have to bring, this will be a procedure bylaw amendment, so we'll have to bring a public notice to next week's council meeting.
Right.
So we'll do that this Thursday. So the changes could be in effect as of January 27th and to take effect for the next committee meeting, February 3rd.
February, that's right. Okay, thank you. So all in favor of the motion? Well, actually, I'm going to say, anyone opposed to this motion? Okay, I don't see anyone opposed for it. So the motion's done by, I think, Councillor Medeiros or Vicente?
Councillor Vicente was the main mover.
Okay, Councillor Vicente. Anyone? So I see no one opposed to it, so it carries. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to 9.2. Our next item is a report of council management framework. Do any members have any questions in regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat box. We'll give a minute for the clerk to put it up. Councillor Vicente, you on the board, or that was from before, Councillor Madero?
I was from before, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I see no one opposing to this, so all in favor of, I have to have a motion for this, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's recommendations in the report.
Okay, and this is moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? No one opposed? It carries. So 9.3, our next item is a staff report regarding that's the framework. That's the same as the other one, Mr. Clerk, is 9.2?
No, 9.3, Mr. Chair, is about procurement options for the forensic audit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. Slow down to that 10. Okay, do any members have any questions regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat box and add your name to the speaker's list, please. Councillor Maderos.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Now, Chair, you had a motion that I think you were going to bring regarding our support model. Is that a new agenda item? And sorry, I missed the beginning, or was that under the support framework?
No, that's, I think that one there is for the in-camera. Am I correct, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is an in-camera portion.
Yeah.
Okay, so my apologies. So speaking to this one, I would move, so regarding this report, I would move, was it option 1, which is essentially that we have a public competitive procurement process regarding the cost effectiveness and fair and transparent procurement process. I guess my questions through you, Chair, would be ideally, I would want this committee, through the lead of the Chair, and this committee select or shortlist who the candidates are, or who the companies are, and subsequently us award who we think would do the best job, obviously with guidance from staff. Now, City Clerk, is that something that we can, or do we have the prerogative to do, or do we have to put any motions in place?
Mr. Chair, I would defer to Gina's on the line, our Director of Purchasing. She may be able to respond to that in terms of procurement in accordance with the purchasing bylaw, in terms of the role of council. So Gina, do you wish to go ahead?
Yes, through the chair, we can actually invite all the pre-qualified management and consulting firms that we have been already pre-qualified. I think we have 6 or 7 pre-qualified, including the KPMG, which is now the current city external auditor.
So through you, Chair, thank you, Gina, for the response. My concern with that is, again, if we wanted to go for those who are not pre-qualified, so this open competitive procurement process, ideally, I would want to see from a cost effectiveness, for those who are not pre-qualified, would they still be able to compete? I wouldn't want to limit it to pre-qualified.
Well, we have to make it public then, so that even those that are not pre-qualified are invited to bid.
Yeah, and that's my question. I would be it would be posted publicly, and all companies would be able to apply. But what I'm asking is that I want this committee in camera or whatever, us shortlist. So I wouldn't want staff to pre-qualify or shortlist anyone. We will shortlist, and then this committee, if we required further information, staff would help us and guide us, but we would make the final decision on who we want to contract.
Would that be okay, Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to purchasing. I don't know if that's consistent with the purchasing bylaw.
My question is, why do we need 70 days to complete this? Well, because it has to be out for tender or for an RFP?
Yes, through the chair, it will be 70 days because that's the normal timeline for a public RFP.
Okay, and we still don't know how much this is going to cost, so we cannot put a price tag on it. We actually find out these companies that want to come in and do this audit, right? But we cannot put a price tag on it this time.
Through the chair, yes, that's right. We don't have an estimate yet of how much this audit will be. We will have to work out with the subject matter experts to give us an estimate. We have to work with department to help us who will be running this audit.
Okay.
Like, who will be managing this audit, which we haven't identified on this report.
Okay. Councilor Maderos?
Yeah, sorry, having the floor. Thank you very much. So I just want to be very clear to, Gina, if you understand what I'm saying. So one, if we need to waive the procurement bylaw, then please identify that for us now. But essentially what I'm saying is, yes, I'm fine with the 70-day procurement, but what I'm saying is that I want this committee to shortlist and to select who we think will do the best job. So for us to do that, and I don't know, City Clerk, if that's something that if we need a motion, I think, you know, if we need to waive the procurement bylaw for us to achieve this, then identify that. What I don't want is surprises and then people telling me after the fact, no, it's not committee, or no, it's not a pre-registered list, or no, it's not criteria, because we've seen all this before. So I want to be very clear. I want, as this is something that the committee has made the decision to take it on its own prerogative to get an outside auditor. So we're not going with anyone internally. We're doing something that we want to. So this committee will make the decision on who the auditor will be.
Okay.
So Gina, is that understood? Is there anything that am I missing? Do I need to move any motion? Or do you need time to speak with Peter about this and come back to us?
So through the chair, yeah, I understand what you mean, that we will have a public competitive procurement. We will send out the RFP. It could be a two process. We will pre-qualify. We will send out the public bid to look for the best auditor, or you know, the short list of auditors.
Yeah, and this committee wants to be able to shortlist and decide who the consultant will be, or who the auditor will be.
And then the second portion of that procurement process is like the actual scope of work given to this shortlisted committee to present their proposal.
Okay, so then we're good with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll move that then, Peter.
Thank you. So just, Gina, to be clear, that this committee will do the shortlisting. Okay.
So I'll move option 1 then.
Yep. So anyone opposed to this motion?
Wait, I just want to make sure, which one should call that a public competitive? Yeah, that's correct. Okay, as is.
Are you okay with it, Councilor Maderos?
Yep. So Peter, that's what we're achieving, right?
Sorry, through the chair, this is Samir Akhtar.
Who's this? Sorry?
Sorry, this is Samir Akhtar, City Solicitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think based on my quick, I'll defer to you, Gina, but based on my read of the purchasing bylaw, council would have to waive the purchasing bylaw to be involved in the procurement itself.
Yeah, and that's why I raised that. So if that needs to be achieved in this language, then go ahead, Peter, and insert it. And during the time that we go in camera, if you need further time, please let us know, and you can come back with the appropriate language. If it's simply just waiving the procurement procedure bylaw, then please include that in this motion.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Charlotte's typing it up now. Would be that we incorporate it into here. The council waive the procurement bylaw, the purchasing bylaw, and when this recommendation goes to council next week, council will make the final decision on that. And in doing so, if they adopt this, they will be waiving the purchasing bylaw to allow the governance committee to assume the role of shortlisting and final selection for this particular procurement.
Okay with that, Councilor Maderos?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Okay. So anyone opposed to this motion?
Sorry, I need.
Councilor Williams, I don't see you on oh, there you are. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. So to the city solicitor, to be clear, we are waiving the procedure bylaw. Why do we have the procedure bylaw in place so that that says councillors and elected officials aren't to be involved in the procurement process? Why do we have that?
The bylaw actually says in keeping with municipal best practices. And so it's part of municipal, it's best practice, but it also mitigates the risk of complaints of political interference in the procurement process.
Oh, I see. So, okay. So mitigating the risk of complaints. So could you break that down a bit? Like, why would people complain? about councillor being involved in something like this?
There's potential for it to appear that there are that the process was influenced by the council. In this case, council is actually taking it upon themselves to make the choice, and so those choices can then be subject to political criticism.
I see. Okay, thank you. When you go, thank you. So when you go to the vote to the chair, I'm in the negative if you're not taking a recorded vote. Actually, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote, please. Thank you.
I was going to ask, thank you. I was going to ask, we break the rules all the time at the region, even here, we've done it in the past, and that's a risk we take, just like our solicitor said. So I guess, Mr. Clerk, do we get recorded votes on these committees or just who oppose?
No, if a recorded vote's requested, then there's an obligation for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. So okay. I'm just going to ask who's opposed to this motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm on the board. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Vicente. Oh, sorry, before you, this Councilor Medeiros. I'm sorry, the list, I got a small screen here. Councilor Medeiros.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. And again, I just want to clarify, it's not breaking the rules. Why are we waiving the procedure bylaw? Because effectively, why we're doing external, and with all due respect to staff, the reason that we are not using our internal auditor is to ensure that, because just to go back at what's the heart of this? What's at the heart of this is that there was a council resolution by this committee, and subsequently an action, in this case, a payment was made against a council resolution. And what was proposed was that this was in conjunction with consultation with 3 internal departments. And to me, when we have more than one department, so staff have come upon themselves to make this decision, and we are doing an external audit because we feel that it, in my case, and why I moved it and why I hope people supported it, was because I have suspicion that this decision was made against council decision, because we were told by staff that they had no other choice, that they had to make this payment. And I'm suggesting that it isn't. And why we're going externally is because internally, it seems that staff have made the decision which we don't agree with. So by waiving the procedural bylaw is to ensure that there's a proper forensic audit to determine how the decision was made. And in fact, if all staff are being truthful in why they made the decision, and to understand how can a council resolution, because I can't stress upon councillors a resolution or a motion moved by council. It's almost, it is something so sacred in municipal practices. To have your leadership go against it and undermine it, that's a serious issue. So before I start accusing everyone, accusing people of doing this, which might be unfair, I want to ensure that we go through this external process to they come back and give us their opinion, which if in fact I was wrong and they did this thing and they can tell us that council was right or staff were right to follow the payment and it did not undermine council resolution and everything was consulted with legal, consulted with the city clerk, then I'm kosher. If I find out in fact and it's determined that a decision was made arbitrarily, not with full consultation, then I think we have an issue on our hands. So that's why we're going external. So it's not breaking the rules. It's essentially for us waiving the procedural bylaw regarding procurement, because I do agree that there should not be political intervention when it comes to procurement, but we're dealing with the sensitive issue regarding council's direction, a political direction which was given, and in my suggestion that it could have been undermined, and that's why we're going to this route. So I just want to be very crystal clear on why we're doing this, and we're not doing this breaking the rules. We're actually following the rules, and to achieve this, to bring clarity and transparency, and I think that's what our residents deserve. So what we're asking is essentially that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Medeiros. Well said. Councilor Vicente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilor Medeiros, for providing that clarification. And it's not that we are breaking the rules, it's that we are waiving them for a very, very specific purpose. And I think it's important, and also, Councilor Williams, thanks for asking those important questions. So just to add on to this clarity that we are seeking here through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk. Why is it that council has the ability to waive the procedural rules in the first place?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I just wish to clarify, council, this motion is not talking about waiving the procedure bylaw. This is about waiving the purchasing bylaw. The purchasing bylaw, as the city solicitor has outlined, has specific statements in it in regards to the role of council. So it's waiving that bylaw to allow a role for council through the Governance Council Operations Committee to play a role. So that's the reason it's there. Because the bylaw says one thing, if council wishes to do something else, the normal way to do that is to waive its rules.
Okay, and we find in many circumstances where councils do that. So is it proper for council to do so when it so wishes to?
It is a proper procedure, and there are certain bylaws, and I will speak to the procedure bylaw now as an example. There are higher tests. A waiving of a procedure bylaw is a 2/3 vote. To my knowledge, the purchasing bylaw, there is no 2/3 vote for waiving the provisions of that bylaw. So it depends on the circumstances at play and what the intent of the decision body is in terms of waiving its own rules.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and through you, Chair. And I think that this context is important, and Councillor Medeiros provided the context under which we are asking staff to do this work. And so as long as that is clear to everyone, I am happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I see no other speakers. So I'm going to ask whoever's opposed to this motion. It's a recorded vote's been asked, Mr. Clerk.
So, Mr. Chair, recorded vote's been requested on the motion on the screen. All those in favor, please indicate. Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon? Councillor Dillon? Mr. Chair, I'll come back to Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, he's having problems. He said yes.
Can you put yes in the chat, Councillor Dillon, please? And Councillor Williams?
No.
And Chair Fortini?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I'm just waiting for confirmation from Councillor Dillon, but it would be, the motion will have carried 4-1 if Councillor Dillon confirms his vote. So if he can please place it in the chat, or if he can get his microphone working.
Yeah. Well, it still carries anyway, regardless. Say, Mr. Chair.
So yes, and if I don't, just to advise the committee, if I don't get confirmation from Councillor Dillon, then he'll be shown as either in the negative or not present. But I do see him in the session.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Councillor Dillon just wrote yes in the group chat.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So it carries 4-1.
Okay. Okay, that carries. So we'll move on to the next item. Deferred matters, none in the motion. So I guess it's councillor question period. This is our next item. I think councillor.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
We'll go in camera first, Mr.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. There's item 10.1, which was the discussion item.
Yes, I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Sorry. It's Councillor Dillon. Did you guys get my message? My audio wasn't working. Okay, yeah, so it was a yes for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Yes, thank you, Mr. Clerk. This is something I brought forward, and we've been talking about this for a while. Remember, Peter, going back even last term, the city councilors are now allowed to look into regional emails, and we've been having a lot of problems even at the region. The staff is not replying back, and it's giving information to certain residents when we don't get replies. So do we have a certain thing, like I remember last term, I was not allowed to really touch certain emails because I was not the regional counselor, and I always respected the role of the regional. And so how's it work this term?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll start, and I'm just going to show something. There is a council staff relations policy that was adopted on March 1st of 2019 by this council. And that's a requirement now of the Municipal Act that there be a policy. And in that policy, it was amended to clarify information regarding information sharing between councillors, particularly in the situation we have pairs of councillors sharing wards representation, both as city and in case of one of them, a regional councillor, or two, as the case may be, for an appointment. In that policy and in the description, it does talk about regional matters in terms of sharing information. And it says that if the matter is a regional matter, regardless of whether one or both councillors are identified, the email, the call, whatever it will be sent to the regional councillor and their support staff for follow-up. It also says that regional councillors should keep city councillors informed about regional issues within their shared ward pairings. So the responsibility for regional matters within the city of Brampton under our current structure rests with the regional councillor. But there is an onus, or in terms of good working relationships, of the regional councillor to keep the ward pairing city councillor informed of what's going on in regional matters.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to clear up. And I do agree, like the area council should know. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, you go on the ballot that says regional and it says city. So it's confusing a lot of the residents when, you know, they don't understand the difference. So, you know, I've always, you know, always said, you know, like they should work together and find a function, and the area city council should have known what's going on. But I've heard from the regional staff that city councils are sending emails and they're not replying back because they're stuck in a jam saying, well, they're not the regional, how could I reply to them? So I just want to, you know, make sure you get everything cleared. Okay, thank you. Anyone speaking to this? I think Councillor Dillon, are you on the board? No. Okay, so that was the only thing that I wanted to ask for clarification. So thank you. I don't need no other thing on this today, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chair, I do see, I think, Councillor Williams and Councillor Medeiros on the board, perhaps. Or I believe, I don't know if Councillor Medeiros was first.
Those were from, I'll ask Councillor Medeiros. I think that was 158 before.
Yeah, that's fine. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. Just very quickly, I thank you, Councillor Fortini, and I do understand, you know, from the clarity perspective is one of the troubles. I think the whole system that we have is sometimes complex because at the end of the day, the resident just wants his issue resolved. And but in fact, when the confusion lies when they write their city councillors and these are regional issues, and then after sometimes as a way to provide good service, city councillor might write the region, and then it creates this confusion because essentially when things go good, you know, everyone's happy, but when things go bad, the regional councillor has to wear some of these issues on items that sometimes they're not familiar with. I will say that, I must say that, you know, since I've been elected and working with Councillor Bowman, we've been pretty clear on the separation of lines, and, you know, he does a great job in terms of anything that is regional forwarded to myself, or even resident inquiries will copy sort of my office from a clarity. I do think that, you know, from my perspective as a regional councillor, sometimes I can do a better job keeping my colleague better in tune with some regional issues that impact our city. So that is kind of a challenge from a communication perspective. But from a reporting, similar to reporting relationships, things have to be crystal clear when it comes to issues that go to the region. The regional councillor should always be copied, you know, as the bare minimum, because ultimately it's the regional councillor who's accountable for anything that's to do with the region. So, you know, as much as sometimes these are small little bureaucratic, administrative sort of processes or activities, when the buck stops, has to stop with who's accountable. And so I think just from everyone's perspective, you know, information sharing is positive. More information that we share with each other is always positive, and it's important to keep everyone in the loop on these processes. But the clarity in terms of who does what, you know, I think Councillor Fortini, you're correct by saying that in order for us to give the best service to residents, that clarity has to be always supported and trusted. So residents know that essentially that there's a regional councillor who's responsible for city and regional issues, and that's why their name is on the ballot, as you suggested, and other. So I do understand sometimes that things get dropped, and ultimately it is a reflection of the type of information sharing that has to be done between two ward pairings, and sometimes leave staff caught in the middle on what to do, how to do it. But the most important thing is that we can't drop any issues for residents because ultimately then we're not doing our job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Arrows. So, Mr. Clerk, it's not only about my ward councillor, and I have no issue with that. Sometimes it's also councillors in different wards, like me going to the same Ward 2 or Ward 5 or Ward, like if it's not my area, when it comes to our staff, they should actually automatically say, I'm not the area councillor or my councillors, I'm only the staff. They should go to this ward councillor or this regional councillor and send it to the right wards. We're dealing with stuff here in the last 4 or 5 months that other areas has been dealing with, and then all of a sudden it comes back to us and we're repeating. So it's causing more work for staff on our city issues and also our regional issues. So, you know, that's why I wanted to try to clear it up. And a lot of times I always tell my staff, like, if it's not our ward, send it to where it has to be. Don't even touch it. So that's why I wanted to clear up. I think I got Councilor Vicente on next.
No, clarification. It's Councillor Williams after Councillor Medeiros.
Okay.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Councillor Williams.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at the chat box here, and then Medeiros and, okay, go ahead, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fortini. And yeah, to echo your comments, I think, you know, we do have, and it's a great chance for me to say I really appreciate my staff and the work that they do, because, you know, it is important that whenever we do get something that is more regional in nature, we make sure we pass it off right away and let the resident know that they will be taken on by the regional staff. And if we don't know, we ask, because that's the best thing that, you know, we can do. Is if we don't know, we will find out where it needs to go and make sure it needs to get to the right person. I do think, you know, being a city councillor, not the only one on this governance committee, not at the region, you know, getting more information about what happens regionally would be extremely helpful as well. And it just keeps us in the know, because then that way, you know, if we're out on the road, we're able to answer a question and say, okay, which is what we do, is your regional councillor is this, and he or she is the best person to be in contact with, and we pass on that information. Because ultimately, you know, if people don't know, we want to make sure they know for the future, because that their regional councillor will be the name on the ballot, or maybe in the next term, and we want to make sure that our residents know who to go to. So I think it's important that we do make sure that if we are getting the right information and know which way to, you know, where it needs to go, and who the right person there is to talk to. So any way we can continue to do that and support that process, we are extremely happy to do that and make sure residents know the information. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilor Medeiros, you're back on the board? Because I see 207, 207, and 210 after Councilor Williams.
No, I said what I already said. Thank you.
Okay, that's why I'm a little bit confused here on this board. Sorry, Councilor Williams. I didn't see your name because I'm all confused here with different times. Okay,
no problem.
End of discussion. That's great, Peter. Only nothing here. There's no motion, nothing involved, and it was just to clarify, you know, what we have, and I'm glad everyone, you know, to follow certain rules, and, you know, like I said, just send them to the right ward councillor a lot of the times. So,
no motion required.
Yeah. So, Peter, we're going to go on to 14. So, councillor question period. Does any member have any questions regarding today's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Motion, councillor, no, nothing. I only know motion question. So, do we have anything from the public, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Chair, we do not.
Okay. And now we're going to have to, I guess we move into closed session.
That's correct.
Will we have enough time for this closed session because we got some other stuff, or do we move it to the next one, or do we'd like to go into closed session now?
Mr. Chair, I think there is enough time. I think it should be it's one item. It should be relatively straightforward.
Okay, so our next, yes, so is there anyone opposed to this motion? No, okay. So there is no obligation, so we'll go into closed session. How much time do you need, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Chair, I would prefer 10 minutes as I'm
Okay.
moderating this meeting remotely. So if we could say if 2:30, and
Yep,
that would be
2:30
helpful.
would be great. And I remind everyone, I think we have a different, what is it, chat to go on to click on? It's not this one here.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So members of committee, if you can leave after we recess, leave this session, and we will keep it open for the end of the meeting. But there is a Teams meeting invite that was sent to you for today's meeting that you'll get on for today's closed session.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go on to closed session.
Mr. Chair, if you just want to take a vote on the moving into closed session and
So
who the mover is.
Yeah, and I'll move it by Councilor Vicente. All in favor of this motion?
So whenever you're ready, you can proceed. We do have the other members present.
Okay, thank you. So we were in closed session, so direction was given. Am I correct, Mr. Clerk?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And so next item, so do we have to vote on this on the outside?
No, Mr. Chair. All you're doing is reporting out the events that occurred in closed session on 16.1. So you've done that.
16.1. So now, yeah, it was concerned. So our next item is business of adjournment. Our next one will be next meeting will be scheduled for March 1st at 9:30 a.m. So I need a motion from Councillor Williams for today's adjournment. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Thank you, everyone, for this today, and please stay safe, stay healthy, and practice